What's up, marketers, and welcome to another episode of the Growth Colony podcast. I'm Liza from Xgrowth to tell you that each episode we bring in B2B leaders to chat about how you can achieve those everyday wins in the marketing world. Whether you're new to the B2B game, working at a leadership level, or even just showing some interest, we know you'll love the episode. So grab a drink, get comfy, and enjoy the show.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode. I'm Shaheen Hoda with Xgrowth, and today I am talking to Sean Ellis, author of the book Hacking Growth. Sean has been behind the growth of some of the largest companies. He's brought 5 unicorns to the market. You would know some of the companies like Dropbox, Eventbrite, LogMeIn, where he's been driving the growth behind these organizations, designing the growth engine, and a lot of other companies that you will definitely have heard of. I'm very excited to talk to Sean, and on that note, let's just give a great welcome to Sean. Sean, thanks a lot for jumping on the podcast.
Absolutely. It's awesome to be talking with you, particularly in anticipation of going to your area of the world here pretty soon. I'm not too far as we touched on real quick.
Absolutely. I know you're going to be in Australia very, very soon, and I saw the ads for it coming around, and I was like, this is amazing, because for anyone who's listening who doesn't have context, I mean, I've been following your work for probably a good maybe 8 years, when or 7 years when you first kind of published your book, and I read the first version of it, and was just fascinated by a lot of the insights there. And I would also say, it definitely helped me upskill as a marketer, as a someone who dabbled a lot in growth. So I just want to say thank you for all of that. And it was just amazing to have the opportunity to have you on the podcast. So we're gonna talk about growth. I appreciate it. We're going to talk about growth.
We're going to talk about growth. Comment, if you don't mind, I want to just comment real fast on what you just said. I would say that probably the most fulfilling part of my entire journey around the world, doing a trip around the world, you would think it would be, you get to see all these cool places. But when I hear from people exactly what you just said, when I hear that I essentially changed their view on things or made them so much better in what they were doing and took their career to the next level. And the fact that I've been hearing it in country after country, whether it's when I say me, a lot of times it's the book that I wrote with Morgan Brown, but the fact that I played a role in so many people's lives and helping them drive so much impact in their companies is hugely motivating to keep doing it.
Sean, I mean, I can't talk for other people, but I think your book built a foundation for me. Like, it wasn't as much as changing my view. Like, of course it changed my view, but it was more foundational. I think it built a foundation for me, and a lot of things that I did afterwards that I'm very appreciative of, and I'm glad that I picked up the book and I did read it. So it really had that impact. So I'm excited. I'm excited for this chat. And we're going to be talking about growth. We're going to be talking about I want to touch on what do you mean for when you say growth? It's a broad statement. It's a broad word. Yeah. What do you mean when you talk about growth? And I also want to talk about in our chat today, talk about some of the methodologies that you have in place that form the foundations of that definition. So let's jump in and really, sure. I want to start with, let's say, foundations of growth, right? I want you to first explain what are some of the core components that come together that defines growth for you.
Yeah, so I think probably the most kind of revolutionary part of growth in being a much more effective approach than historically people had taken with this new approach that we talk about in the book is thinking about it as an integrated system, that it's not just it's not just acquisition is where a lot of companies in the past, they kind of thought, okay, the marketers are the ones who are really responsible for driving growth in the business. They're going to get the word out there. People discover the product and we're off to the races. Where in reality, there are so many steps to creating a passionate customer on a product, and marketing plays a small role in that, plays an important role, but a small role. Product plays a really big role in it, and product then involves engineers and designers. So really what this approach is all about is first understanding what does your engine look like that creates really passionate customers, and then how do you drive improvement across all parts of that engine? So the improvement piece actually dates back to kind of ancient Greek times. So that's taking the scientific method that we all learned about in early science classes in school, and essentially taking that kind of test learn approach, but doing it not just in the marketing channels, but what's the right first experience to give someone with the product? So we call that activation. And so a lot of it, in the days when I was figuring this out, a lot of other people were figuring it out. So we've got Dave McClure with the Pirate Metrics. You've got Facebook that's done a lot of pioneering work. But ultimately, when you pull it all together, it's about how do you use testing and learning and data to improve how you acquire customers, how you convert customers, and how you retain and monetize customers. And when you apply that test learn process across all parts of the customer journey, you have so much more power in your growth engine than someone who's really kind of thinking of those as disparate parts of the business, where most of the test learn is happening on the customer acquisition side, on simply the marketing end of things. But marketing is you can't be a good marketer. And this was part of my discovery of this. I could not be an effective marketer if my company was not good at converting and retaining and monetizing those customers, because I'm a disciplined marketer that tries to make sure that if I'm spending money, I'm getting a return on investment. But kind of all of the return on investment end, other people in the company are controlling the levers that really drive that.
Sean, how does that play in the B2B scene? As you know, a lot of our audience are in the B2B scene, and I know you kind of talk about the model where we have the acquisition and activation and retention and revenue and kind of engagement. A lot of people talk about the bow tie. A lot of people talk about, the funnel narrowing down and then expanding. What are your thoughts on that and the parallels there?
Yeah, that ultimately all businesses are about acquiring, converting, and retaining customers. Unless it's a one-off product, like maybe a movie or like a piece of entertainment content. Most businesses, then, I would say, are about acquiring and converting and retaining customers. And so in B2B, it's just a different type of engine that does that. So in B2B, one of the things that makes B2B a lot harder than B2C with some of these approaches is that you have a human element involved in the kind of often in a sales-led model for sure, where people are all, you may have multiple salespeople or even customer success people or engineers, sales engineers, kind of different layers that go in there, that it's really hard to standardize an exact replicated approach with every customer. And when you can't standardize, it's hard to learn what works best and drive improvement. But I think we're right at the brink of when we will be able to understand it almost on a standardized level. And that's probably going to require AI to be applied at that part of the journey, where now you can have AI processing, all of those emails and figuring out what works best, processing even all the voice calls and figuring out what works best. And then starting to, because I think salespeople would love to do that. I started in sales. I would love to do that. But if I'm going to take half of my energy to document everything, I'm going to be a lot less effective as a salesperson. So most salespeople are pretty realistic. And so
No.
as a result, you don't have the ability to drive that systematic testing and learning and improving that you do when it's an entirely a digital experience. And so that's part of it. And I think I haven't actually heard the bow tie phrase before, but I think what we are seeing in B2B is kind of the consumerization of the enterprise, where ultimately the salespeople and the initial transaction that converts a company into a customer really just creates a new channel. And then that channel almost works like a consumer channel, where now, in order to be able to retain that customer long-term, I have to make it relevant to the employees of that company. So sometimes the company can say, we're standardizing on this and you have to use it. And then that's okay. That's like one way to do it. But increasingly, you're starting to say, once the initial transaction's done, if I want to actually drive the usage, which causes the long-term retention, I need to now make it relevant to each person inside that business, get them interested enough to want to use it, get them to a great experience the first time they try to use it, and then get them to ongoing experiences where it now becomes something that they're so happy to use that when they go to the next company, they're actually an advocate that helps plug it into the next company, and it becomes part of that growth engine. And kind of zooming back out a little bit to growth in general, the interesting thing with all the test and learn, and you're mechanically driving people maybe through a process of turning them into really happy customers, every one of the unicorns that I worked on, the number one channel ultimately was word of mouth. Really happy customers telling other potential customers, you got to try this stuff. And so that only happens when you're really good at making sure that you've delivered a great experience to each customer, or at least each customer who is capable of having a great experience, because we've all been in a situation where somebody who just does not have the needs that the product satisfies tries to use it, and you're not going to be able to convert them. But if you can get the right people to the right experience, a huge part of your engine then becomes an organic flywheel of just really happy customers telling other happy customers. And increasingly, I see that on the B2B side, is that you start to spread from organization to organization as employees move from company to company.
Do you want to catch Sean on his 2024 World Growth Tour? Well, lucky for us down under, he'll be in Sydney and Melbourne from March 21st to April 4th. For tickets to his Unlocking Growth workshops, go to seanellis.me and click on World Tour. Otherwise, check out the links in the description box to find out more about this awesome event.
Sean, first of all, I love how you weaved some of the components of growth into why growth is important, right? Because it sounds trivial to say, oh, why growth is important, but a lot of people don't use the methodologies that are in there. I'd love to kind of hear from your side. What are some of the challenges that you've seen here in terms of implementing some of the pillars in organizations that you've worked with?
Yeah, even like one more comment on the why side. I think what is amazing is that we're not in a situation where every single company on the planet is trying to replicate these approaches, because the companies who've used these approaches, they started mostly in Silicon Valley, but when we look at Australia with what Canva has done and what Atlassian has done, and then all these Chinese companies that have been explosive, you have really it's spread from Silicon Valley to all parts of the world now, and that we ultimately have the fastest growing companies in history, and we are starting to see it go into the B2B side and into really traditional companies like banks, and so there is a playbook that is way more effective for growth, and so it is surprising to me that not all companies are trying to do it. And then the second piece that's pretty surprising is that most of them who do try to do it actually fail. And so it is really challenging. And so maybe that's why the other ones aren't trying to take the leap. And so what makes it really challenging is that the old way was really almost the production line kind of, everyone specializes in their own area. the marketers get really good at marketing, the product people get really good at taking feedback and building a long-term roadmap based on a vision and trying to create the greatest product. And this new approach requires kind of rethinking how the whole business works together, that ultimately there's one customer going through that experience, and growth, the kind of growth levers sit in all these different organizations. And so to be effective, you actually need to be able to work cross-functionally. And it's surprising how difficult that is. And so I have for a long time tried to find even literature that is, you would think every business school on the planet would be, running big research studies on who's figured out cross-functional and what's the formula and how do we get companies working more effectively this way. But I think particularly when it comes to growth, it's essential. You can't do it if you're not able to collaborate really well cross-functionally. And so that would be probably the biggest challenge. And then I think part of that then becomes that you're actually adding kind of a new layer to the business in order to facilitate that cross-functional work. And that's always a little bit scary. If people, I think a lot of times more advanced thinking is like, okay, I'm going to have these different groups. They've got clear areas of ownership. You got to trust each other, that they're each doing their work well. You don't want to interfere. And that these growth organizations that are doing a really good job, they're not taking over marketing and a bit of this and a bit of that. They're actually complementing what marketing does, complementing what product does, and ultimately creating a connectivity layer that sits on top where they are facilitating that experimentation across that entire customer journey and have a view into that entire customer journey. And they're able to use data and really surveying and usability testing and other inputs to understand opportunities for significant improvement. And so if you don't have buy-in, say, from the product team, then you have a group of growth experts that go in there and try to change some things in the product. You create all this friction where the product team's saying, wait, I have a vision, you're gonna break my vision. And it creates so much friction there that it really slows down that velocity of experimentation. And unless you have a growth leader who's really persistent, what they end up doing is just gravitating to the areas of the business that are the easiest, and the easiest areas are rarely the most impactful. And so then that lack of impact ends up getting teams to say, well, this doesn't really work. Maybe we're in the situation where it doesn't work for us. And then they lose momentum around the initiative and they fall back into their old habits and old ways of executing the business. So I think that is, I would say that probably happens. It's really hard to know the exact date on it, but I'd say it probably happens in 80 or 90% of the times that companies are trying to adopt this much better approach to growth. They get frustrated and then they fall back into the much less effective approach to growth.
Sean, you said something about velocity of experimentation.
Yeah.
And I know this is very core to the model that you've built, the engine that you've designed, even for a lot of organizations. Can you talk about what does that mean? What is velocity of experimentation?
Yeah. So I'm going to put it in context that there's really two shortcuts to significantly improving growth in a business really quickly. And one of them is velocity of experimentation. It's so simple. Jeff Bezos, founder of Amazon, former CEO, basically sums up our success at Amazon is a function of how many experiments we run, per month, per week, per day. It's just I see it in company after company that if you just take however many experiments that you're running and you double that number, you generally see a significant uptick in growth. Now, if you're only doubling that number, say, in the number of Facebook ads that you're trying, then, or something on just the surface level of advertising, it may not make that much of a difference. But if you're then able to run it really across all of those opportunities and focus that experimentation on the on the biggest opportunity. So the biggest opportunity tends to be either a part of the customer experience that's broken, that you have a major leakage where majority of people are not getting to a great experience. So that will be the second big opportunity for fast acceleration. I'll go into that. But the first being, just your ability to drive a lot of experiments in the right areas is the fastest way to accelerate growth. And then the second one being, if you initially focus on customer activation. So how do you get the right people to the right first experience in the product, and really focus a high velocity of experimentation around that. So understand what is the right first time experience with your product based on the customers that stick with you long term, and how do I get all the other ones to that experience as quickly as possible. That is a very fast way to accelerate growth. And again, that tends to fall in the part that's right in between marketing and product. And so it's kind of in that no man's land where no one is focused on that. Products focus on a long-term roadmap. Marketing, it tends not to get into the code, which is what's required, at least on a consumer product, to really shape that first experience. And the fact is, if someone doesn't have a great first experience with a product, rarely do they come back and have a second experience.
I love that. And I want to come back to number two, because you said number one is velocity of experimentation. I want to come back to number two, but talked about Amazon as well. And we had a VP from Amazon on the podcast some time ago, and VP of marketing. And she was talking about a situation where they were trying to get the business from a university and grow their business from a university. And this was on the marketing person's table. Mm-hmm. She had power to change pricing. She had power to change the logistical operation of how Amazon runs, and obviously all the marketing stuff. And it was just fascinating to see how her remit of things that she could do was much wider than the traditional marketing. And I think it goes to what you were just mentioning about, being able to be in those areas. Maybe it's code, maybe it's logistics, maybe it's, pricing, whatever it is, but you have that impact.
Okay, just one quick comment on that typically, even if a marketer is comfortable doing those things, there is something that's strange that, we learn in marketing classes in school that product is one of the 4 Ps of marketing, but in the reality, at least in the tech world, product does not trust marketing to come in and start touching code and start affecting the customer experience. And so I learned pretty early on that if I have any kind of, and I was a VP of marketing for 10 years in my first 2 companies. And so I learned pretty early on, though, that having marketing in my title prevented me from really influencing those key levers of growth. And it wasn't until I got so frustrated in the marketing role at LogMeIn, the second unicorn I helped take to market, where I could not scale profitably marketing, where I ultimately figured out that 95% of the people who were signing up for the product never used the product. And so we had raised $10 million. My CEO is pushing me to spend that money, and I can't spend the money because our product is so hard to use in the beginning. And the product team is so focused on this long-term roadmap that they're not thinking about that. And so it wasn't until the CEO learned this information that most people signing up aren't using the product that he made it a priority for us to come together. And once we came together and actually fixed the sign up to usage rate, in 3 months, we improved it 1,000%, which sounds crazy, but I mean, you think like you spend $1 somewhere and previously you're losing, 50, you're getting 50 cents back on each dollar. You're going to stop spending those dollars if you're a rational marketer. Now that same dollar, I'm getting $5 back. And so my ability, no new creativity on marketing, no new controls, no new talent on the team. I just went back and tried the exact same things I'd previously tried, where I was experimenting like crazy. I'm trying every channel I can, every ad I can. I'm even optimizing on landing pages, but that's as deep as I could get. and so I was getting the signups, but they weren't using. So once we had that 10x improvement in sign up to usage rate, I could now scale to $1 million a month on the exact same channels that previously scaled to 10,000 a month with a 3-month payback on marketing dollars invested. So that was the big light bulb moment for me, which was, oh my God, I am completely dependent on the product team to be able to be effective in my job as the head of marketing. And so, it's that was my first real glance at cross-functional being a really powerful driver of success.
It's a great example. Great example. So velocity, let's go back to velocity of experimentation being number one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but again,
talk about number two.
Yeah, again, the velocity of experimentation, I had a high velocity of experimentation, but I had kind of maxed it out in my area. And so I would not have fixed that problem, but I'd run twice as many ads or twice as many experiments in advertisements, in channels, media channels, in landing pages. I would not have fixed that problem. So it was once we pushed that experimentation, because I was only doing that high level experimentation in acquisition. So once we push it one level down to activation, that's not including engagement and kind of retention loops and referral loops and how we monetize. It was just one level down at unlocked everything. And so that one level down tends to be a problem in every company that I engage with. So I go in with the first, my assumption that the first area I'm going to focus on, first area I'm doing is I'm driving some alignment up front. So just to kind of fill in the gaps on what I do these days, I try to go in and work with a company at least, once a year or every other year, where I'll go in and do a full-time 6-month growth transformation or go-to-market role where I'm putting the right systems in place to allow them to effectively execute this approach. And so the very first thing that I do when I go into a company is within the first 2 weeks, it's in my contract, we are going to do an alignment session where I explain to everybody the importance of high velocity experimentation and the importance of getting on the same page around how growth works in the business. And that ultimately, if we all are on the same page around the need to experiment everywhere, then I have a fighting chance to be successful. But if I don't do that in the first couple of weeks, then I'll lose all the momentum and won't have really a chance to be successful in the role. So that's the first thing I do. But then once I start to run the experimentation, it's generally in activation, and activation is the area that, again, bringing people to the right first experience with the product is what leads them to come back. And if I can, that's a biggest driver of long-term retention, is a great first experience. And so it takes a lot of research. So I need to find who are the most passionate customers. I need to go back and study how did they get started with the product. I need to understand why do they love the product. And ultimately, I need to focus on what we call an aha moment. What is the right first time experience? And so in the B2B space, Slack really nailed this. And I had previously worked on a competitive product to Slack before Slack came out. One that you had Yammer and then this other product called Socialcast. And it was the hardest business that I've worked on, because you basically had to tip the network in each one of your customers in order to make the product stick. And so what Slack did that was really brilliant that I wish I would have figured out was that they said they found that it's not until a new company has 2,000 messages that they are likely to be retained long-term. Basically, if once they get a company to 2,000 messages in their system, almost all of those companies are long-term retained. And so that creates a big forcing function to say, I can't even deliver that aha moment to any of the users within that company until there's 2,000 messages in the system. So my two big levers for that are, how do I get a whole bunch of people to get invites and actually come in and use it? And then how do I increase the number of messages per person? And so that's where you get into something called an engagement loop, where you start to figure out how do I accelerate the number of messages that are being sent. So you have Nuriel covers this really well in his book called Hooked. But basically, you have a trigger that gets someone to consider the product, reminds them to use the product. And so in a communication product, that's pretty easy. The trigger is the notification that I have a message. So I read the message and then I reply to the message, which now creates a trigger for the other person who has a notification. So that alone start to get you closer to those 2,000 messages. But the faster you're pouring people in, the better you can optimize that engagement loop. The quicker you get to the 2,000 and the 2,000 messages, and the more likely you'll be able to tip that new customer into someone who becomes a long-term customer. But just that description on Slack, I think, starts to give you some visibility into how that's such different thinking compared to how most companies are approaching growth.
Absolutely. I love that. I love that example. And I know that, I've read examples from you about Uber doing the same thing, and a number of other organizations, Twitter doing the same thing, and a number of other organizations have these activation metrics that it is the North Star. It is the only thing that we're going to look at, and we're going to push this and drive this for activation.
Yeah, and what's amazing though, that again, that's just one lever. And so at LogMeIn, that example I gave you, once we optimized that one lever and got people to that right first time experience, the business exploded. The business ultimately sold for nearly $4.5 billion, several years later. But we were languishing. We finally figured out activation was what we needed to focus on, and then we started to grow really fast. But the interesting thing was, it was not the biggest driver of new people coming in. I've already mentioned this, but I'll put it in context now, was not that $1 million a month we were spending. That only accounted for 20% of our new users. 80% were all these people who had now come in and done. LogMeIn's a remote control software. So you install it on your computer, you can control it in any other computer. So all these people who had done this remote control session now were telling lots of other people that, oh my gosh, there's this great product. They have a free version. It works really well. And that ended up driving a ton of new people. And so what's interesting is that I never really optimized that referral loop. I was a little bit worried that if we started to try to offer some incentives, that it would seem too manufactured and I might break it. And so it wasn't until I went to Dropbox, which was 6 months after LogMeIn, that Dropbox was so early in the process. There was only 8 employees there. And so we were really early in the process. So I thought, we've got really good word of mouth, but we won't lose much. If we test this, we can roll it back. And so when we introduced incentivized word of mouth, it was a significant accelerant. So while LogMeIn, so much of the growth happened when we figured out how to unlock paid advertising by getting that activation right, almost all of our efforts at Dropbox were actually around the referral loop. So of course we needed to get activation right first, because no one's going to recommend the product if they don't have a great first experience. And then also, you're not going to be able to convert those people who discovered it through those recommendations if you don't have a great experience for them as they come in. But basically, once we had good activation, then there were so many opportunities to A/B test everything from the triggers to recommend the product to someone, or to share a file, and then to essentially test all of the conversion elements on those recommendations. So by focusing on the referral loop at Dropbox, we were the fastest SaaS company. I mean, this was after I left, but I put the process in place that put them on a trajectory where the fastest SaaS company in history to reach $1 billion in revenue. And I think a lot of it was just using this test learn approach across all of these viral drivers. Of course, at the foundation, the product is a really good product. And none of this works if you don't have a really good product that meets an important need. But there's a lot of companies that have product market fit, and are never able to do much with it because they're approaching growth in kind of that old school way, where marketing is on a different planet from product or sales or engineering, and the magic happens when they all come together.
I love it. And of course, who can forget the 250 megabyte editions on Dropbox
Right.
when you send an invite.
Yeah.
And I remember I would be sending. I'll just be looking for people. I'll be like, hey, just accept this. Just accept this, and
Yeah.
get to 500 and 750, and it was I mean almost fun to do it.
Yeah,
It's just
and it worked
fascinating.
great. It worked great. There's definitely numbers out there that have been published. Like I always try not to be the one to put any number out there when it's still secret, but they put numbers out that showed the acceleration once we introduced the referral program. But even before that, referral was a massive driver in that business, and then just the right set of incentives set up in the right way. So again, when someone actually converted on that referral, being able to now trigger the person who referred them and say, you just got 250 free megabytes of space. Do you want to recommend it to someone else? And so that became another trip. But these are just all ideas that were in people's heads. And when we were all on the same page about being able to, the importance of experimentation, the importance of measuring, and really everyone wanted to make a massive impact with the product. That's what we were able to do. But again, I think the key piece here is that 8 people when I was at Dropbox. It's much easier to implement this type of approach when you don't have years and years of people operating in the old way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Sean, last thing I want to ask you is I'd love to hear, what do you see coming when it comes to growth? How is growth what do you think is going to be the next evolution of growth, and what are some of the emerging trends that you are on your radar and you're paying close attention to, or you even driving yourself?
Yeah. So first, I want to put the caveat and just the reminder that with all the exciting things that are going to help the people who are doing this take it to the next level. So I'll come back to that, which I think AI is going to play a massive role there. Again, the majority of companies fail in their attempt to adopt it. So I think none of that's going to matter if people fail in their attempt to adopt it. So all I would say is just one thing that I mentioned there, that when I go in and I'm trying to drive growth transformation in an existing business, I always focus on that upfront alignment. You can't become cross-functional one function at a time. You got to have people step out of their day-to-day and get everyone on the same page. And so a lot of my world tour right now is actually doing either private workshops where I'll do it for a single company and they'll send hundreds of employees. I'll spend a full day with them. Or I found a more affordable format where I'll do 10 companies at the same time, who each then send 5 cross-functional heads of product, sales, marketing, engineering, and then they spend a full day working together to implement these recommendations, and I'm coaching them through that process. So that's, I think, all the exciting things around the corner aren't going to matter if people can't get themselves to the point where they're actually executing this way. So that's what I wanted to start with. But now let's go to AI. I think AI will have a massive impact, and I'm of course doing a lot with it now. I think it just content generation, it's good, but it's also great for test ideas. So the last full-time interim VP growth role that I did was a company called Bounce based in Lisbon, but it's an app for luggage storage. So they have 10,000 partners around the world, so bars, hotels, restaurants, bike stores, where you can bring your bag and store it for $5 per day. Use the app to find them; they're reviewed, and so that. Yeah, where was I going with the question on that? Oh, yeah, on the AI side. So for Bounce, just simply typing in, tapping into like Chat GPT, give me 10 headlines for a product that does XYZ with 10 words or less, and the benefit of this. It'll maybe 6 of them will be things I don't want to try. But the fact that in one query like that, I get 4 new headlines that are like, God, I would really like to try that. Whether I try it in ads or I try it on pages on the site itself, that's a pretty simple thing that I've been able to do already. But I now do it anything that I write. I essentially have a sparring partner. Like one of the big benefits when we wrote Hacking Growth. So Hacking Growth has almost 1 million readers now. And when we wrote Hacking Growth, I think one of the things that really helped it be good was having sparring partners. So I had a co-author, Morgan Brown. We would essentially write something. No, that's not good. That doesn't capture it. The back and forth. Then we had editors who were not from the industry say, "What the heck does that jargon mean?" And just all that back and forth up levels the content. And so now, whatever I write, I run it through AI, and it kicks back some, probably garbage copy that is way too fluffy and machine sounding. But I then start editing what it has written. Then I'll plug it back into AI and say, give me a short. So first I'll say, give me a more compelling version of the following. Then I'll say, give me a shorter version of the following. And so all of that back and forth now helps me crank out a lot more content that's better than I could in the past. And it kind of breaks that writer's block. So again, if the velocity of testing is really important, now you can also say, give me like images, give me ads, you're starting to be able to crank out a lot of test variations by just plugging them into different AI tools. I haven't done the images side yet, but I know a lot of people who have, and it's working well for them. So I think that's one side of it, and I think the other side is just processing data. Like I mentioned in the B2B space, I think finally we will be able to understand the signals of what's working well with the most successful salespeople, and signals that maybe even if you tried to get them today, you might not think about it, but it'll be spotted in AI. So it's not just about which salesperson is best at hitting their sales number, which maybe we would want to optimize on in the past, but which salesperson actually converts customers that are long-term retained, which means that they're actually able to explain what the product does in a way that is authentic to what the product is truly great at. And so there's so much information out there that when you start to have AI processing that information, you can make sense of that information a lot more. So those are just some of the things, but I think, faster analysis, better surfacing of opportunities, and then faster just ideation of things you could test are all really exciting. And I think within the next year, if I'm just not in a super active role right now where I would be doing that, but if I was, I'm sure within the next year, it would be a huge part of my playbook to do all 3 of those.
I love it. This is great. Sean, I got a couple of rapid fire questions for you before we wrap up. I want to go through and get your thoughts on. So first thing is, what is one resource? This is a book, a blog, a podcast, a talk, whatever it is that has had a big impact on the way that you work or live. And this could be something that you read a while back. This is something that you recently read, or it could be both of those. I can take both.
So I tend to go back and read a lot of the same books over and over again, just because it's like, I haven't read it for a year, and that was so impactful for me, and I'll extract new things out of it. But one that I constantly go back to is Influence by Cialdini. I think it's a lot of this stuff. Running a great experiment is often about being able to get inside the heads of customers and being able to understand what prevents them from taking the actions you want to take, and also what encourages them. And so that book gives a lot of tools to help guide tests that are likely to generate good results.
Love it. Anything recently you've gone through that you really liked?
I've been so busy on this tour. So 100-day tour. I don't have an opportunity to read anything. So I'm trying to remember prior to the tour. I think just it's
what
like
was
Atomic
it before the tour?
Yeah, Atomic Habit, like a lot of the kind of habit building books I really like. So there's I can't remember the name. Like Atomic Habits is one of them, but there's another habit building book. But I tend to kind of get a topic in my mind and then try to read everything about it. But on a personal level, like Life Force by Tony Robbins was awesome. Just being able to kind of understand the latest science and what's around the corner that's going to help us live healthier and happier and longer lives, and more energetic lives. And so he's not just pumping you up as a listener in the typical Tony Robbins fashion, but he's connecting with the leading experts in fields and really letting you see what's around the corner on some really cool science on longevity and other things.
Love it. Question 2, if you could give one piece of advice to B2B marketers, what would it be?
Focus actually on how many people are you able to get to the core experience of your product, and all other numbers are serving that as for a marketer.
Sean, I mean, you are a thought leader and influencer in this space, but I'm also curious, who are some of the thought leaders and influencers that you follow or you listen to regularly and you read their stuff?
Most of the people who I find most fascinating aren't writing a lot of stuff because either their companies don't let them, or they're just so busy executing. So I met with the founder, or no, not the founder, the kind of the early head of growth for TikTok, who actually joined ByteDance a couple of years before TikTok was introduced, and I met with him this week in Singapore. So again, one of the great things of traveling around the world, and he just being able to really talk to him about how he built that growth engine at TikTok. It was awesome to hear how influential my writings were to his approach on things. But then, of course, every opportunity is different. Every situation is different. And so I really learn by what people do with the material that I put out there. And the ones who are following this process will figure out better things than I'm recommending. That's the beauty of this process. It's a continuous improvement process. And so I learned a lot from that conversation. And the coolest thing just being that so much of what he did at TikTok was stuff that he learned from me, and I had no idea until 2 days ago. But the same thing, fastest growing fintech in the world, probably the most interesting company I've seen on this trip, a bank called Nubank in Brazil. Over 90 million customers today. They had less than half of that in early 2022, and no traditional marketing. Yet the foundation of everything they're doing is I had never even heard of them until I went to Brazil. I maybe heard the name, but knew nothing about them. But at the foundation of everything they're doing is the survey that I put out years ago, where you ask existing customers, how would you feel if you could no longer use this product? And those who answer very disappointed really show you the keys to building a super passionate customer base. And studying what they had done with that question in building their business, they do it on a feature level. They do it with every product that they roll out. And I would have never guessed that the coolest company I would see on this trip or discover on this trip is a bank, but they're amazing.
I love it. Last question, Sean. What is something that excites you about B2B today?
Just as the next frontier in doing these things, I think what you're finding with this growth process is that it started in Silicon Valley in consumer businesses, or there's pockets of it. I actually didn't move to Silicon Valley until 2007, but so I had taken 2 companies to market with a test-learn approach, and I mentioned how I kind of discovered it at LogMeIn. I was in Boston at the time, but the core learning was in Silicon Valley, and I had the opportunity to connect with a lot of others. And so I think being able to see it start with consumer, roll out beyond Silicon Valley internationally, and now you're starting to see the big winners in B2B are the ones that don't say, I can't do that. I don't have the volume coming through or the experimentation that I can run. We're just not designed that way. But when I see like HubSpot, their engine, as soon as they change to this high velocity model where every single product has a free version, upsells all the way to enterprise, and then cross-selling I immediately reached out to the founder of the company and said, "Hey, I just bought a lot more of your stock because I think you're going to kill it with this approach." And he's like, "Yeah, you mind if I share that with the team?" And then the stock, I held it for not that long. I mean, maybe a year or two, and got like 500% gain in it. But I still sold way too early. I think they're up a couple 1,000% since that time, and so it just shows the power of this in the right context. You have to adjust it to each context, but it's super powerful. So yeah, I think that's, to me, it's what excites me about B2B is the creative people that are going to apply this in B2B, and I will be able to learn from them.
Sean, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Thank you so much for all the insights. I know you're going to be in Australia, and in I think in both Sydney and Melbourne, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct. It will be my first time in Melbourne.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, how can people find out more information?
Yeah. So yeah, my first time in Melbourne, but I was born in Sydney, which most people don't know. So it's kind of interesting. So if you go to seanellis.me and you click on the World Tour link, that will take you to my partner's website. It lists the cities that I'm in and the dates that I'm there. And yeah, we've made the conferences really affordable, and then for those who want the workshop, it sold out last week in Jakarta. It sells out pretty fast, but I limit it to 10 companies because I think I can't provide enough kind of hands-on help through the day if we have more than 10 in the room. But just check out seanellis.me, click on World Tour, and you can definitely learn more.
Fantastic. Sean, again, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Thanks for your time, and thanks for all the golden nuggets and insights.
Absolutely. And thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. I'm excited to share a beer with you when I get to Australia.
I'm looking forward to it.
Today's episode of Growth Colony was produced by Alexander Hipwell and Liza Maywald. It was edited by Dave Samito with additional editing by Liza Maywald and music arrangement by Alexander and Liza. Special thanks to Tina Wabe. We couldn't make the show without you. Growth Colony is hosted by Shaheen Hoda, Director of Growth at Xgrowth. If you enjoy the podcast, please subscribe and give us a rating on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Do you think you'd be a great guest or just keen for a chat? Send through an email at podcast@xgrowth.com.au. That's podcast@xgrowth.com.au. That's all for now. We'll catch you next week, right here on Growth Colony.